Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Tina's Leg. Today is going to be a story time video about the time that my husband and I spent in the Marshall Islands. We were only married a year and a half when we literally packed up everything and went to the Marshall Islands to live. About a year after my husband and I got married, there was a man and he came to our church and he spoke about the Marshall Islands. He had lived 30 years of his life in the Marshall Islands. In fact, when he died, his family went and they buried his heart in the Marshall Islands. So he loved the Marshallese people and he wanted a part of him to be buried there. He came to our church and he showed videos of people on the Marshall Islands and kids singing and just lots of pictures of their lifestyle. And what they desperately needed were teachers. It was through a church organization, but the school was actually kind of a separate entity. And so you didn't need a college degree to go, and you didn't need a teaching degree because most of the kids that graduate in high school in the Marshall Islands maybe have a fourth grade education. And so they just needed teachers who were willing to go and teach. During that service on that Sunday morning, my husband and I could not stop crying. We saw the video, he shared his story of his time there and just how the people impacted his life. And so we just really felt like, you know, we're in a season of our life where we didn't have kids yet, we didn't own a home, and we really had just gotten married and didn't even have a lot of earthly possessions. We were able to save some money. Our church did sponsor us and helped us get there. And we did get paid a very, very minimal salary when we were there. I think we maybe got paid a total of $400 a month to live on while we were there, which was mainly to buy groceries. So we greatly relied on people back home helping us, sending us care packages, things like that when we were there. But before I get ahead of myself, I want to tell you where the Marshall Islands are located. Marshall Islands are a part of the islands in Micronesia, almost smack dab in the middle between Hawaii and Australia, north of the equator. And so it's very hot and humid there, very humid. 80 degrees all year long and 80% humidity. The only seasons that change is there's a windy season and a rainy season. The rainy season was scenes out of a movie where you look out over the water and you can just see the rain coming in just sheets of rain, and you are drenched. I would be drenched down to my underwear within like 2 seconds. Unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. We made the decision to go. Our family supported it. We were very young. I was 21 and my husband was 23 when we went there, and we did stay a year and a half. We left January of 1995. We didn't come back until June 1996. The island that we lived on was an island called Ebeye. The Marshall Islands are groups of atolls, and an atoll is a string of islands. Ebeye was 1 mile long and 1/4 of a mile wide. If you stood on a 2-story building and looked out, you could see the ocean on both sides. The Marshallese people, they do speak their own language. We did not have a language immersion or anything when we went there. We were embraced by the principal of the school and the pastors of the church. Thankfully, there were other Americans there. I would say we were considered missionaries to be there. Not your typical missionary because they did pay us and we were working. There were other Americans that were there doing the same thing. And so there was a group of us. I will just show a picture. And so we bonded pretty quickly over the fact that we were American. And the ones who had been there a long time, they kind of took us under their wings and really taught us the culture, taught us a lot about the language. I mean, we learned some of the language, main words and phrases that were important. So, Yahweh, Yahweh, is hello. It's also goodbye, kind of like aloha in Hawaii. They helped us with the customs, the culture. They introduced us to all the people. Even though the island seems small, it's only 1 mile long and a quarter of a mile wide, there were 12,000 people that lived on this island. It is actually sadly known as the armpit of the Pacific. The only thing that brings people to that island specifically is that they work on Kwajalein, which Kwajalein is a military base. It still operates as a military base today, but it does employ a certain amount of Marshallese. Anybody who lives on Ebeye, somebody from their family usually works on Kwaj. When we agreed to go to the Marshall Islands, we were shown pictures of thatched huts, the really cool boats, the catamarans. We were told a lot of the island, they live off the land, the coconuts, the fish, all of that. My husband was so excited. I was so excited. And when we got there, it was extreme culture shock for us because there were maybe 20 trees on this island. There was one street and it went around the whole island. So it was just one big giant circle, and then the homes lined the main area. And if there were stores, they would just kind of be around the peripheral. It was not big, and the homes were made of plywood and the corrugated metal roofs. They were just nailed onto plywood, and that is what the homes were made of. Most Marshallese people didn't have American type furniture. They sleep on mats that they make, and they would bring them from other islands, but one of the things, it's woven palm fronds, and they make sleeping mats out of those. They usually had tables. They would have a couple chairs. Strangely, everybody had a TV. The only way they had TV was because of the military base. And so, but as far as their normal furniture, they always had stuff to cook on and cooking utensils and things like that, but maybe a 20 by 20 room. And there would be a kitchen on one side. They probably had a bathroom somewhere. They would have a couch or TV and things like that, but no mattresses. And so then at night, they would put out all these mats, and if they had 12 people living in their house, everybody would just come home and grab a mat, and they would just sleep all together on the floor in one big group. And that's how most of the families slept. Some of the wealthier families would have a couple bedrooms in their home, and they might have a little bit more furniture, but for the most part, it's the third world country where the people live very, very, very simply. So the culture shock of coming in thinking it was going to be more islandy, and it was actually not. Aside from the fact we were on an island, it was quite an adjustment. They did get us American furniture, and they could go onto the military base. They would have garage sales and things like that. So the Marshallese people, they were allowed to go to the garage sales and get things from the Americans that were moving off the island. So they did get us a bed. We actually had a mattress, and we had a TV stand, and they got us a table, and then they got us two lounge chairs type things. We didn't have a couch, and they didn't match. I do have pictures. My husband, I think he's holding our dog. We ended up getting a puppy. His name was Buster. We had to leave him when we left, but this was when he was a puppy, and you can see the chairs in this picture. They didn't match. Because of TV, they knew kind of how Americans lived and what their expectations were a little bit. So they did really try to give us the things that they knew we would need when we were there. So in our bedroom, it was very small, and it literally was just a bed. We lived very simply. Running water was hit and miss. Sometimes the island could not generate electricity or water for the entire island all at once. And so they would do 6 hours on and 6 hours off. When the electricity was on, you had to boil water. We could not drink the water. It wasn't safe to drink. So we had to boil our water. and we had a catch mitt that we shared with the other people that lived in our building. Catch mitt is a giant plastic vat, I guess, that catches the rainwater and stores it, and that is what we used to bathe, flushing toilets, washing clothes. All of that was all from that water. And so we couldn't access that though if the electricity was off. We had to store bins of water for bathing and flushing toilets when the electricity was off. The things that were hardest for me, I'm going to be really honest, the things that were hardest for me, they had flying roaches. The roaches were terrifying. Terrifying. When the lights would go out, I'm talking maybe 5-10 minutes. If it was at night and we would be laying in bed, they sounded like tiny bats hitting the wall, flying around. And I'm not joking that I was traumatized by the roaches during my time there. If I enter a room still to this day and I see anything dark in my peripheral vision, like on the ground or on a wall, like I immediately go into panic mode. My heart starts racing. I have to make sure it's not a roach. I have fully been traumatized. We did a trip to an outer island one time, and I was with one of my friends. We went there to do it was a youth conference, and our entire school went to this other island. They had us sleeping in somebody else's home. I did bring a pillow. Thank God. I brought a pillow, a sheet, toilet paper, all very essential items when you are traveling. I bought a can of Raid. If somebody makes an exception for you because you're American, it is very rude in their culture to say no. I wanted to go and sleep with all the girls that were staying there. They were staying in like a big cafeteria room, just all on the floor. But I wanted to go and stay with them. However, they wanted to honor us and have us sleep in a pastor's home and in his room with his children. And so we could not say no to them. And we're laying down and we're just talking quietly and we're trying to get settled to go to bed. It's dark, the lights are off. And as we're laying there, I start feeling all these things crawling all over my body. And I completely start freaking out. I'm crying. Cheryl was my friend that was with me. She's American. And she's like, Tina, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And so we turn the lights on because we're trying to see how many roaches there are. And we should not have done that, because when we turned the lights on, we realized that there was roaches absolutely everywhere. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, I brought a can of Raid. In the area where we were staying, and we had 2 mats for us to sleep on. And I took the can of Raid and I sprayed it in the outline of our beds. And we killed as many roaches as we could. We are hitting roaches with our shoes, with anything that we could grab. There was a broom in the room and we're hitting roaches with the broom. And I'm screaming. And I'm trying not to wake up their kids, but it is a very hysterical moment. I spray the Raid, I'm crying, she's trying to talk me off the ledge, and finally I mummify myself in my sheet. So I lay down on my pillow and I literally mummified myself. I tucked it all around my body. There's no air conditioning, and it was not a windy night. And again, it's 80 degrees with 80% humidity. And so I am laying under the sheet, profusely sweating. And I can just feel, even over the sheet, I can feel the roaches crawling all over me. What I didn't realize is that, yes, Raid kills roaches, which is what it's intended to do, but it also attracts roaches. And as we are laying there, we hear more and more roaches. I prayed to God that night that he would I said, just take me, just take my life now. I can't live any longer. I genuinely did not think I would survive the night. And Cheryl was like, just try and go to sleep. Just don't focus on it. You're going to be okay. They're not touching you. They're just on your sheet. Well, in the morning, she was so wonderful. In the morning, she got up before me and she swept up all the dead roaches that were around us. I just got up and I went to the bathroom. She didn't tell me until later that when I got up to go to the bathroom, I had dead roaches stuck in my hair and smashed on my back. I can't handle it. I can't handle it. So I was in some very traumatizing situations with flying roaches in the Marshall Islands. That to me was the worst part of the entire time that we were there. The culture. So women could only wear muumuus, and a muumuu is just a dress. We had to be fully covered. Your arms, you could not expose your shoulder. This would be totally illegal. It had to go usually down to your ankles. Maybe mid-calf would be okay. Definitely nobody showed knees or shoulders at all. And it was very customary for husband and wives on different special events to have matching fabric. So they made us all kinds of matching outfits, and I do have some pictures. So they would make my husband a shirt and they would make me a muumuu to match. And I had to wear muumuus every day. Even if I wasn't teaching, even if I was just going to the store, going to the beach, I was supposed to wear muumuus. Now, I was allowed to wear, I decided to wear an island print. I was allowed to wear like baggy, flowy pant outfits as long as they covered my shoulders and stuff as well. So I did get a couple of those when I went. The only reason they use the ocean is to bathe and wash clothes sometimes if they didn't have access to running water or a washing machine. So even though it was an island and they were surrounded by water, aside from fishing, they didn't swim for enjoyment, which swimming is my most favorite thing in the world. So for me to be put on an island and told I couldn't swim was like, what? That just did not even compute with me. That was one of the customs I did break. I went swimming and I would just kind of go off on my own. I didn't want to make a big deal about it. I would wear something like this, like I would wear a flowy pant outfit. Now I did bring bathing suits and I probably had one underneath, but if they saw me, I needed to have clothes on. So, but the water was amazing. I mean, Micronesia, it's the #1 scuba diving place in the world. People go all over the world to scuba dive in the oceans of Micronesia. Water's amazing. The fish are amazing. You can snorkel. My husband's absolutely favorite thing about being there was he learned to spearfish. And he would go out spearfishing all the time. He would follow the tides, and there were reefs near our island where, so it was World War II where the Marshall Islands was taken over as a U.S. territory, and there are bunkers on some of the outer islands. There are still tons of rusted out tanks and boats in some of the outer islands. It's crazy. I am going to show some of that because we did visit a few of the outer islands and we saw like this is a rusted out tank that's just sitting there on the beach. It was just left after the war. And then there was a lot of bunkers. The Japanese did come in and there was bunkers there, and the war was fought on some of those outer islands. It was fascinating. You would just walk and there'd be rusted out ships. You could see half of a ship that had sunk and half of it was sticking out of the water. Like, it was crazy. My husband loved to spearfish, and in part of the atolls, the military had bombed several of the reef areas, and it was specifically blasted in order to be a giant pool. And when I say pool, I mean a pool the size of it could have been the size of a football field, would be a large pool area. And so they would be blasted out along the reef. And so when the tide would come in, all these fish, I mean, we're talking sharks, stingrays, octopus, any kind of fish you can imagine, when the tide was high, would get trapped then into these very large pools. And then when the tide would pull out and recede and get low, you could go in and dive and be in these pools and spearfish. And that was one of my husband's favorite things to do, was to spearfish. And one of the guys that lived in the same building as us, he would always go out and spearfish. And they would provide so much food for a lot of the teachers and the pastors and the people on the island. And it would end up being a huge blessing. I'm gonna tell a really funny story. So when he would go out, usually if it was low tide in the middle of the night, that was the best time. So he had all the equipment. He had the underwater flashlights, his spear gun, the bag that's attached to your waist, but it floats out behind you. So if a shark does smell the blood, it would attack the bag and then not the person. My husband and his friend went out around 11 p.m. to go spearfishing, and he should not have been home until probably 2, 3 in the morning, because sometimes they would walk really far to get into the pools. And then by the time that, if they spearfished for an hour or 2 and then walked back, I mean, it was several hours of the night. And one night he was only gone like an hour and a half, and I was so surprised he was back early. And I was in bed asleep, and he crawls into bed, and I was like, so what happened? Why are you back so early? Like, is everything okay? And he's like, oh yeah, everything's fine. I'm like, did you catch a lot of fish? He's like, oh, we'll talk in the morning, go back to sleep. And anyway, he was being kind of weird about it. The next day I got up before him and I went to teach at the school I taught in the morning. The school was divided up into elementary school and high school. Elementary had classes in the morning. They broke for lunch, and then the high school met in the afternoon. So I taught elementary school, and then my husband taught high school. So he got to sleep in. So I went to school, was there for the morning, and then I briefly saw him in passing, but we never talked about the night before. And then that evening, his friend came over, and they're talking to each other, and they're being so weird. And I don't think he had told his wife either. So I'm like, what is going on? Like, what happened? So sharks' eyes do glow in the dark, like a cat eye, I guess. If you shine the light, they're the ones that are glowing back at you. And they were used to having sharks around them when they would spearfish. And we're talking white or black tip sharks. So they were 5 or 6 feet long. They usually weren't, I mean, we're not talking huge great white sharks or anything. But still, at night, and you're swimming with sharks, I mean, that can be kind of freaky. Well, they were in a pool. They had been spearfishing for just a little bit, and they had the fish in the bag, hanging off the back of their waist. They're swimming, and they realize they're kind of cornered into this cove, and they really didn't have anywhere else to go. And so when they turn around and shine their light, they just see all these glowing eyes surrounding them. So they panicked, and they cut their fish bags off of them and let them go. And then they climbed out of the pool and came back home, which they were embarrassed that they chickened out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so glad you chickened out. You may not even be here if you didn't. My husband loved the island life. I am going to show a cute birthday picture of him. It was his birthday when we were there, and they brought him 2 crabs and 2 coconuts, one for me and one for him, which was really sweet. And I am going to show you a couple pictures. So I taught 5th grade, and I wanted to show you some of my students that I taught, and they were just amazing kids. And they didn't speak very good English, but they spoke enough. So going back to them having TV, a lot of the Marshallese people learned how to speak English because of TV shows and soap operas and Baywatch, of all things. So I will tell the story about Baywatch because I just couldn't even believe it. Here, we were not allowed to even wear anything that showed our shoulders or our knees, and I couldn't even wear shorts or anything. And I would walk in to somebody's house. I mean, they only had really tiny TVs, usually in the corner of a room. And there would be like 10 people, whoever was in that house, they would all be crowded around this TV, watching Baywatch, as the women were running up and down the beach with their boobs bouncing up and down. And I'm like, how does this even make sense? How does this even make sense? Sadly, they did not even experience divorce until they started getting access to soap operas. And then that is when they started divorcing. They didn't even know that was a thing. So kind of sad. When I was there, it was very interesting because they had kind of adopted some of the worst things about our culture into their culture. And like, they thought that that's all Americans were about, basically, were soap operas and Baywatch. It was very humbling, kind of embarrassing. We really had to kind of lay down even the American culture as we knew it in order to embrace some of their culture. That just took time, and we built relationships with them. We got to really love them. And my kids, I loved the kids that I taught. My husband, the high schoolers absolutely loved him. And so these are some of the high schoolers, and they would just show up. Like, one thing about the Marshallese culture is they will show up on your doorstep any time of day. Any time of day or night. They would knock on your door at midnight, and there'd be 10 to 20 of them, and they would just want to come in and tell stories and maybe sing songs. They would bring guitars with them, and you would just drop whatever you were doing and just be with them. They are a very big family community people. Family and relationship is very important in their culture. And so people come first over anything. If you have somewhere to go or somewhere to be, you would always put the people first. The one thing that was very difficult was, even if we were tired or we didn't want to be up and we were already in bed, you kind of had to, a lot of self-sacrifice had to happen. The Marshallese word for white person is rebelle, and they would call us rebelles. On that island, there was a lot of people that had diabetes. Another one of the things that they got from our culture that is not good is sugar, because the military base was next door and would supply them with different things. They had access to sodas, candy, and they didn't have, I mean, maybe there was one dentist on the island. The hospital was very tiny. They did not have good health care. And so there was a lot of people that had diabetes and had to have amputations, but they did not have access to prosthetic legs or anything like that. So if somebody on the island had an amputation, they either were in a wheelchair or they had crutches. A prosthesis or an artificial leg was completely foreign to them. So when we first got on the island, if I was walking down the street to go to the store or walking to go anywhere, the kids would scream to each other, and they would say, "Rebelle, rebelle," and all the kids would come running outside, and they would sit on the curb, and they would watch me walk by, and they would surround my leg and my foot, and they would call me Dolly, because they thought my leg looked like a doll's leg. And my nickname became Rebelle Dolly. I was a white doll. They were just so infatuated with my leg because they had never seen anything like it before. In my classroom, when I first started teaching, I had to show them my leg and everything, or they would never have even listened to me because they would have been so obsessed with it. And then I had an interpreter. She was a high school student who spoke English pretty well, and so she would be my interpreter for me in my class. And I had to teach math, history, English, and science were the four main things that I taught. One of my really funny moments that happened to me when I was there is my students wanted to learn an American song. And so I was thinking, well, what's a song that kids learn that's really easy that I could teach them? And so one of the childhood songs that I thought of was Row, Row, Row Your Boat. So I started singing. They erupt in crazy laughter, like cannot control themselves. They're laughing and laughing and laughing, and they're all looking at each other, and they look completely shocked. And I'm like, why are they laughing so hard? I'm like, this isn't a funny song. And I look at my student helper who was supposed to translate. I asked her, I said, why are they laughing? And she wouldn't tell me, she wouldn't say anything. And so she just kept laughing, and she asked me if I had another song to teach them. And so I was like, okay. So I ended up teaching them another song. Well, at the end of the day, when all the kids left, I pulled her aside and I'm like, you have to tell me why they were laughing so hard. She finally ended up telling me, and she said, the word row in Marshallese means women's privates. I was like, awesome. My kids are now gonna go home and tell their parents, look what I learned, Mom. Vagina your boat gently down the stream. So that was a teacher fail on my part. I did not know that that was a taboo word. My husband also made some of the same mistakes. We learned a lot of things the hard way. I'm sure we greatly offended them over and over and over again, but we did our best and we learned a lot when we were there. It was a great experience. One of the best things that I got to do was I love to choreograph dances and songs, and even though I have an artificial leg, dance was always a passion of mine, and I am very creative, and I love music and plays and acting and things like that. And so I would put together, the Marshallese people called them action songs, and basically I just put actions to words for them. And very simple songs. We would do different worship songs. They would come over and I would teach them songs. They loved it so much that when I go back to talking about their culture and them showing up at any time of the day or night, they would knock on my door at 10 o'clock at night and say, Miss Tina, we're all waiting at the church for you to teach us more action songs. And I would be like, I'm getting ready for bed. Like, who's waiting at the church? Oh, there's like 20 of us. We're all waiting. It all started with me doing a really funny song that I thought would be easy for them to learn, and I taught movements to it. And then what happened is then word of mouth spread, and then all the high school students wanted to start learning the song. So it was a special song for Easter Sunday. And I had about 20 kids that wanted to be a part of that dance. And the church and the people, the entire island knew about the fact that I was teaching these kids dance movements to songs, and they all wanted to be a part of it. And so I would have people knocking on my door day and night and tell me, please come down and teach us action songs. We want to learn more action songs. And I probably started doing that in April. So we got there in January, and the entire rest of the time that I was there, I would say that was my main purpose for being there. That touched my heart in such an amazing way, because what is more powerful than music and actions, even if it as a language barrier? It's such an awesome way to tell a story. And so they just ate it up and wanted me to teach them so many songs. And that was the main thing I did when I was there. Aside from teaching elementary school, that became my main purpose. And then they would take these songs and travel to other islands, and they would perform and put these songs on at schools and churches and different events. And it spread throughout all the islands about these kids doing that. And it was just an amazing time. We call it the best worst time of our life because we were so young. We flew across the world. We left all of our family and friends behind. We didn't know what we were getting into. We had to trust God immensely during that season of our lives. And we came back totally different people. I hope you enjoyed learning about our time in the Marshall Islands. If you stayed till the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you just have a really blessed week. If you enjoyed this content today, please don't forget to comment down below. I would love to hear any questions you might have, any comments regarding it. If you've been to the Marshall Islands, if you've heard of the Marshall Islands, I would love to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching Tina's Leg, where every day is leg day.